Thanksgiving this week, so I hope you knew that. If not, you have 4 days. I'm not a real teacher, I just substitute teach. I don't know things. So hopefully I did my math right. It's been a long time since I had to do that. But this is Thanksgiving week, and it's oftentimes a time where we can really reflect on the ways that we have been blessed, right? And so I think that's the main reason, and so when we look at Thanksgiving and we look at the pilgrims and stuff like that, some of those stories that many of us grew up with, we think about all the ways that the pilgrims, they were looking at the ways that God had blessed them, as far as their travel and the food and prosperity and things like that. And we've kind of carried that tradition on, from that time to our time, where we use this time to reflect on the different blessings and the different things that we have to be thankful for. And so, if you're anything like me and you eat your meals with your family and you always have, a time where you kind of remember the things that you've been given. For me, growing up, it was always, we would always pray and, pray for the food and stuff like that. And we would all often talk about how, we were thankful for family. We were thankful for the love that we had in our family. We were thankful for, Jesus. We were thankful for his sacrifice. And we would kind of go through and kind of think about some of the things that we were thankful for. And if I'm being honest, and maybe my mom will text me later or call me and say that I'm wrong and correct me, and if she does, cool. But if not, we're going to say this anyway and hope for the best. As far as I can think, I can't really remember a time where I remember praying, at Thanksgiving and being thankful for the freedom that we have in our country to even be praying to Christ without fear of a penalty. And oftentimes when we really think about thinking about our freedoms that we have, we really remember those on 2 different days. We really remember it primarily on Memorial Day, and we primarily remember it a week ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that, for Veterans Day. So oftentimes those are the kind of the designated days that we really remember the freedom that we have in our country to worship God the way that we desire, the way that we want, and the way that we feel led to do so. But many of you, if you use Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and some of those holidays to remember the sacrifice that was given for us to have those freedoms, many of you likely also think about what it's like to live in a country where that does not exist. And recently, I saw a video, and it was interesting. I saw a couple of videos. One video we're going to play today, and it is a little longer, so for that I apologize. It's roughly 7 minutes, but that gives me a 7-minute break, so But it is a little longer, but I think it gives a very good representation of what life could look like for us. But another video that I've seen, and actually I've seen a handful of these videos, and if you are one of those TikTok people, you might have seen a similar video recently. Something that has kind of become very popular in the recent week or two is this letter that Osama bin Laden wrote to America. This has kind of been making its wave throughout America, and it's been making its wave among predominantly my generation, because sometimes we were young, and so many of us don't really remember what 9/11 was really like. We don't really remember the horror and the travesty of all the stuff that had happened. We were playing with blocks, and so, and I know you guys are like, wow, you're so young. I know, I deadlifted yesterday. I don't feel as young as I am. It's okay. But many of us, we don't really remember some of the terror that really went on during that time. And so what's happened recently is that these videos have come to light of this letter that Osama bin Laden wrote to America. And what I've really seen kind of take place is a lot of people in my generation, my age, they've kind of taken this and been like, Osama bin Laden was right. And I know many of you, if you remember the 2001, and you remember all the stuff that happened, and you remember in 2011 when he had been killed by the SEALs and stuff like that, you probably remember what it was like to feel a sense of relief that that had already taken place, and that something like that had been dealt with. And recently, I've seen that my generation were having this different view, because what we've read in the letter is that there's things about America that he said that we can look at and say, that's kind of true, and we can see the point that he made. But my biggest fear really is this. You see, I took some time on my own to go through the letter that he wrote in 2002, and then another one that he wrote a little later, I believe in 2006. And one of the things that's very scary is that his argument is that, America has played its hand in harming his people, and his decision is that they should naturally retaliate, and that they should spill the blood of Christian people. That the debt that has been incurred by America and the wars that they have carried out, we as Christians should pay the price for what the government did. That's a very scary reality to live in. One where it seems, just the natural way of things that Christian blood should be spilled. And the reason I bring all of this up is so that as we approach Thanksgiving, we can really start to realize the benefits that we have in our country. That we are able to worship freely and express our faith in God freely because of the country that we're in. And we've been in this series going through growing pains. We've been looking at the book of 1 Corinthians. And today, as we look at chapter 4, we're going to see Paul kind of talk to this Corinthian church about something that I would argue is very prevalent to us today. And that's the reason that I chose to do this series and go through this book, is that when I look at the book of 1 and 2 Corinthians, I see a church from ancient times that we can see a lot of resemblance in America today. And so I want us to kind of watch this video, and Garrett's going to go ahead and put it up. But I want us to watch this video and think about what life might look like if it wasn't for the freedom of religion that we have in our country today, and what life might look like if somebody like Osama bin Laden had his way and was kind of obsessed with the spilling of Christian blood and controlling this narrative regarding the gospel message. And so, Garrett, if we can go ahead and put that up, we're going to go ahead and watch this together.
In the primary school, we were taught that we were terrorists. They told us that children will be nice to you at first, but when they get you into their homes, then they will kill you and eat your liver. There was no food and no water in my village. Like some others, I snuck across the mountain border into China. I picked mushrooms in the hopes of selling them in Shanghai. I don't speak Chinese at all. But in the mountains, I met a man. He said, I can sell those for you. And he didn't cheat me. He gave me all the money from the sale. At that time, I didn't know he was Pastor Han. Over the next 2 years, I went back several times. Each each time Pastor Han helped me. One day I asked why he would do this, for he himself was in great danger for assisting a North Korea. It is because I am a Christian, he said. That made me afraid. Was he going to eat my liver? One day, Pastor Han said to me, God is real. There is hope for every person. I could not believe he would say that word. God. Nobody says that word. We know it is an act of treason. To speak the name of God came little soldiers coming in the night. There will be no trouble. No journalists will write about you, and no one will ever dare ask where you have gone. One day I asked Pastor Han for a Bible. He knew that if I was called with a Bible, my life would be in danger. But over time, I persuaded him. I showed the Bible to my wife. At first, she refused to even look at it. Why would you bring that here? She cried. She knew that if anyone reported that you had even glanced at a Bible, you would be arrested, and not just you. You and all your relatives sent to the concentration camps for years and years and years. Over time, my wife too learned that God is real. She found hope. And then I shared the word of God with my best friend. It was very dangerous for me to share.
다시는 연락하지 말라. 우리 모두한테 좋은 소식이야.
It was very dangerous for him to listen. One day in the summer of 2016, we heard that some North Korean assassins were being honored by the government, rewarded for their good work for killing a terrorist missionary in Shanghai. We knew it was Pastor Han. Who else could it be? You are frightened. Did they know he was my friend? Did they know I had met with him many times? Pastor Han gave his life, but he gave hope to me and to many other North Koreans. And despite the ever-present danger, many of us will continue to share the message that God is real. We hope that our sacrifice, when the day comes, will be worthwhile, just like it was for Pastor Han.
So, did you catch that video? Did you catch the end? 2016 is when Pastor Han was attacked by a hit squad from North Korea to kill him because they believed that he was a terrorist. Not because he actually was, but because that's what they are led to believe in North Korea. 2016. This is not like this was, way back when Paul was writing this letter. This is not 2,000 years ago. Many of you have cars that are older than this event. I am older than this event. Pretty much all of the high schoolers in our church and in this community, older than this event. A lot of the kids in the elementary school, older than this event. This is going on. This is not some distant, event in a time way past. This is current. And this was just in 2016. But people in China and people in North Korea and people in the Middle East, they fear for their lives because of the gospel message that you and I get to live out for free every day. Every day they fear for their lives, and they fear for the lives of their families and for their friends and for those who know them because of who they believe in. This is a real situation. And it's one that you and I get to avoid because of where we live. Because of a country that has been defended and one that supports freedom of religion, you and I get to worship God freely in this building without worrying about some hit squad from another country coming and killing us. And so, as we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 4, we're going to see Paul talking to the Corinthian church and seeing their situation as opposed to Paul's own situation, and we're going to see the difference in the life that they live. Right? So if you remember from weeks past, we looked at the Corinthian church, and one of the things that they're arguing and bickering about is that some they follow the teaching of one guy, they follow the teaching of Paul, some they follow Peter, some they follow Apollos, some they just claim that they follow Jesus. And so there's all of this arguing that's going on about what they believe, and Paul has to try to set their mind right of, hey, look, there is something much bigger going on here. And I would argue that just as that was going on in the Corinthian church 2,000 years ago, it's going on in America today. Where it's like, well, what church do you go to? And, let's start a church softball team. And, we're going to see which church can beat which church. We're going to see who can grow our church more. We're going to see who teaches better and who preaches better and whose worship sounds better. And we're going to do this. And there's this competition that takes place in the American church as to, who gives better donuts, who gives better coffee, do we give Folgers or do we give Starbucks, or who gives better this or who gives better that, and we argue over these things that just frankly don't really matter. And so Paul, he has something to teach us. This is what he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, this is verse 6 through 13. If we can go ahead and put that up, it says this. Now, brothers and sisters, I have applied these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, so that you may learn from us the meaning of the saying, nothing beyond what is written. The purpose is that none of you will be arrogant, favoring one person over another. For who makes you so superior? What do you have that you did not receive? If in fact you did receive it, why do you boast as if you hadn't received it? You are already full. You are already rich. You have begun to reign as kings without us. And I wish you did reign so that we could also reign with you. For I think God has displayed us, the apostles, in last place, like men condemned to die. We become a spectacle to the world, both to angels and to people. We are fools for Christ, but you are wise in Christ. We are weak, but you are strong. You are distinguished, but we are dishonored. Up to the present hour, we are both hungry and thirsty. We are poorly clothed, roughly treated, homeless. We labor, working with our own hands. When we are reviled, we persecuted, we endure it. When we are slandered, we respond graciously. Even now, we are like the scum of the earth, like everyone's garbage. Paul's talking about the apostles. He's talking about those who've been sent out to proclaim the gospel to the known world. And he's talking to the Corinthian church, and he's saying, look at all of the blessings that you have. You're already rich. You already have honor. You already live as kings and queens in your land. Look at us. Look at what we're going through. Look at the poverty that we live in. We're homeless. We're hungry. We're thirsty all the time. And we do this for your benefit so that you might know who Christ is and what he did for you. I would argue that sounds a lot like the American church today. Many of us, we don't know what it's truly like to struggle. And I'm not saying that, we go throughout this life with no financial hardships. And I'm not saying that we go throughout this life not knowing what it's like to miss a meal from here, from every now and then. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that as a church, as a whole, we have programs built into the church, and we have programs built into our country where that stuff, for the most part, can kind of be limited and prevented. In North Korea and in China and in the Middle East and in Russia and in all of these other countries, they are going into your house, they are pulling you out, and they are putting you in concentration camps, and they are beating you and forcing you to work, all because you believe in the name Jesus. This isn't happening because you're some terrorist. This isn't happening because you're a criminal. This isn't happening because you're a murderer. This is happening because of what you believe. We are so blessed in this nation, and oftentimes we just act like we're going through the hardest thing in the world. We are so blessed, and oftentimes I feel like it spoils when it's used on us. I feel like we get so caught up in this comfortable shell that we call the United States of America, and we get so comfortable in this shell that we call the Constitution that we don't branch out. We have people all around the world where just saying the name Jesus will get them killed or land in prison and get them tortured just for saying his name. And still, for them, the gospel is enough to tell people about him. The gospel is enough to go through these punishments and to go through these hardships just because of who Jesus is and what he did for their life. And oftentimes in America, we find ourselves in these situations and we're like, I don't really want to tell my friend about Jesus because, well, what if they just don't like me? Well, Thanksgiving's coming up. All my family's going to be together. We're going to have a meal, but, you know the unspoken rule. We don't talk about politics, and we don't talk about religion. We don't talk about Jesus at our meals because, we don't want family members to feel unloved or to feel unaccepted. People are dying for this. People are dying for a message that you and I can proclaim freely. And Paul tells his people that every single thing that they have received. The same is true for you and for me. Everybody here has received the gospel. Everybody here has received the freedom of religion in our country because of what veterans were willing to do. What they were willing to do in 1775 and 1776, and what they're willing to do now. And what they've been willing to do throughout our entire history. We have freedom, not because, if you're a veteran, thank you for your service. But most of us here, we have freedom not because we worked hard for it. It's not because we went overseas and fought for the freedom. It's because others did it for us. And what Paul is saying here is that all of the gospel that you have received, all of these things that you have, you've received it not by your own labor, so why do you boast about it? Why not walk in humility? And I would argue that the call for us as Christians today in America is the same thing. The point that I want to make is this. If we can go ahead and pick that up. Walk in humility and remember your blessings. Walk in humility and remember your blessings. Because other people around the world, they don't have the same blessings. And if you meet many of them, they're more humble than we are. They're more humble than we are. We have been given a huge blessing just by being in America. We have been given a lot of freedoms, and to an extent, those freedoms work in other countries. If we work as a missionary in another country, and it's a country that is against Christianity, if we get put in prison, you'd almost best believe that that's making headline news in America. You'd best believe that there are many policies where the president is going to make some kind of statement. They're going to work to try to make exchanges. We just saw it recently with some people who were, I believe, in Syria, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I saw the news report, but there was a prisoner exchange that our government did with another country in the Middle East to get American citizens back. In other countries, that's not the same blessing. Do you think Pastor Han, who was a Chinese citizen, do you think when he was murdered by another country that China was just like, hey, don't do that, and they demanded, some kind of compensation? I'd argue that based on their alliance that they still have, probably not. We have blessings here. And they're not to be taken lightly. Paul goes on to, in this chapter, he goes on to talk about how he's been almost this father figure for the Corinthian church. And we're not really going to read it because it's just, that's basically what it is. That's a summary. Paul talks about how he is kind of the father of their faith, that he steps in to kind of guide them. And one of the things that I do like, that I do want to emphasize is verse 14, he says, I'm not writing this to shame you, but to warn you as my dear children. And then in verse 21, at the very end of the chapter, he says, what do you want? Should I come to you with a rod, or in love and a spirit of gentleness? The reason that I preach and say these things is for the same reason that Paul did. It's not to promote shame in our hearts as we approach Thanksgiving and make us feel bad for the things that we have. That's not the purpose. The purpose is that we would recognize the blessings that we do have and that we wouldn't squander it and just act like they don't exist. My goal is that when we hear stories like from North Korea, when we hear stories from the Middle East, and when we hear some of these different stories of how the gospel is spreading throughout the world, that we wouldn't say, wow, that's so great. I wish I could be like that. And then go back to scrolling through our social media and avoiding the hard topics at family dinners. You and I have been given the same message that Pastor Han was given. We've been given the same message that Paul and the other apostles were given. We've been given the same message as those who have died for their faith. The people who died for their faith, they were willing to do so because of how important it was to them and how important sharing it was to the world. My prayer, my encouragement is that we don't avoid these hard conversations in our own personal lives. Because if we have people who are willing to die to tell their loved ones who Jesus is, you and I get to live if we choose to do the same. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day that you've given us. God, I thank you for all of the blessings that we have because of where we live. God, I thank you for our freedoms. I thank you for those who were willing to give it all so that we can have those freedoms. God, I pray that we wouldn't squander it. God, I pray that as we interact with the people around us, that they might know who your Son is because of the life we live and the message that we preach. God, I pray that we would not be afraid to tell others, because our brothers and sisters around the world, they have a lot more to be afraid of. God, I thank you for your Son. I thank you for his death, his sacrifice on the cross. God, I thank you for his resurrection. And I thank you for the hope, the freedom, and the forgiveness that is provided to us because of what you did. God, I thank you for that blessing. God, I pray that as we leave, we would walk in humility. God, that we wouldn't hold our heads too high. God, that we wouldn't become arrogant because of the freedoms that we have and the blessings that we have. God, I pray that we would always work through our lives to spread those blessings to others. And it's in the name of your Son, Jesus, that we pray. Amen. As usual, this will be the time of invitation. If you have any decisions that you'd like to make, any prayer requests that you'd like to lift up, any praises that you would just like to thank God for this season, this will be the time to do so as the band comes